Wait a couple minutes.
Went a little quick there.
It looks like you were underneath a palm tree there for a minute, but then you disappeared. All right, maybe you should go ahead.
All right, let me get this thing started. So, hello everyone. First and foremost, I'm Tanner Arnold. I'm a student here, senior at the colleges. I'm just gonna kind of brief before we get into anything else. Just remind everyone to please keep your microphones muted, as this is actually being recorded to be kind of replayed again for different sessions for the people who weren't able to make it today. And if you have any questions at all, there's a little chat feature within the Zoom app that feel free to just go in there and submit the questions right in there, and then we'll get to that towards the end when we go through the Q&A session. Or part of the session, excuse me. A little bit more background about myself. As I said, my name is Tanner. I'm a senior here at the colleges. I am an economics major with a double minor in entrepreneurial studies and environmental studies. Tom Drennan, actually, the professor who is here with us today, is my advisor and has been my advisor for all 4 years since I've been at the colleges. I'm originally from a small town in New Hampshire called Windham, New Hampshire, right around the southern end of the state. And I guess we're going to get right into this here and kind of go over what I guess Professor Drennan has been teaching, and he's been one of the major influencers in getting the Entrepreneurial Studies program started at the colleges, and has done a lot of great things for the program itself. So we'll get right into some of the questions I have here for him, and we'll get started. So first and foremost, Professor Drennan, if you can tell us a little bit about your background and any of the research projects you've been working on.
Absolutely. Thank you for hosting this, and thank you all for joining in today. I hope that you will type in questions, and so we can make sure we answer all your questions today. This is a different world. It's not normally the way we do things, and it's how we're doing all our classes right now. So, you know, this is kind of our new world right now. I think the good news is we're all learning a lot from this, and you think of a company that's really doing well these days, and it's called Zoom. You know, look at the stock price of Zoom and see how well they've done through this pandemic. All right, so a little bit about myself. Yes, I'm a professor of economics and environmental studies, and I am the chair of the Entrepreneurial Studies program here at Hobart and William Smith Colleges. I've been here about 23 years. A little bit about my background, because I think it tells you something about why I'm at Hobart and William Smith Colleges and why I think you should seriously consider it. Personally, I went to really large schools. I actually did a nuclear engineering degree at MIT, and then I went on to University of Minnesota for my master's, and then ended up at Cornell, where I did a PhD in applied economics. All really large schools. I never thought about going to a small school. And honestly, the way this all came about for me was a professor who was teaching at Hobart and William Smith came to a seminar at Cornell while I was at grad school, and I started talking to her, and she invited me to come up to Geneva, New York, and sit in on one of her classes, to give a lecture in one of her classes. And so this is probably 28 years ago, and I remember that class so well because it was the first time I'd really been in a small, intimate class with a bunch of inquisitive students. And there was this kid there named Thomas, and Thomas challenged everything I said, and that was never something that happened at MIT, University of Minnesota, or Cornell. MIT people didn't even talk. So, you know, this is a very different world. And for someone like myself, I found that really exciting to have people actually having discussions in the classroom. And so I was kind of hooked on the small school experience. And when a position opened up here, I jumped on it and haven't looked back. I really enjoy being here, working with students like Tanner. We do not have graduate students, right? We have undergrads. And so to help us with our research, we have to rely on the students we have here. And so that's a real benefit to the undergrads here.
And then kind of going back off of that idea of research with undergrad students, more specifically, do you ever work with students on research projects? Or I guess, are there other ways in which the students and faculty collaborate within the entrepreneurial studies department more specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a huge part of it. I get uh, I get excited when I meet students who are interested in the same things that I'm interested in, and I try to get them engaged in my research. Um, I actually even co-authored a book with one of my students. Her name was Jennifer Rostall, and she graduated, and I hired her for a full year after graduation to work with me on this book. We did a bunch of modeling together and writing, and we published a book. And her name, it's Drennan and Rostall on the book. And almost every summer, I have a student or two working with me, and there's a lot of opportunities here on campus to work directly with your faculty members.
And also, Professor, can you kind of talk a little bit about the curriculum within the Entrepreneurial Studies Department and how it supports students pursuing their own entrepreneurial interests?
Yeah, absolutely. So entrepreneurial studies is a minor. At Hobart and William Smith, every student has to declare a major and either a minor or a second major. And so entrepreneurial studies is a minor. It's 5 years old now, so it's still fairly new, but it's by far the largest minor on campus. We have almost 300 students in it now, so about 20% of any class at HWS are minoring in entrepreneurial studies. So a minor is typically somewhere between 5 and 7 courses. Entrepreneurial studies requires 7 courses. Some of those, though, you actually might take as part of your major, so you're double counting. Especially if you're, say, an econ major, then the econ principles course definitely counts. If you're philosophy, some of the courses there would count. So it's a maximum of 7 courses. But let me just give you a brief overview on what those courses are. And again, this is really brief. I'd be happy to answer more questions about it. But just a very big picture of what it's all about. The very first course is called Entrepreneurial Studies 101, which is basically a leadership course, and it's an overview for the whole minor. So think about, we try to get students to think about, if you have an idea, how do you take that idea and grow it? What are the steps you have to go through? And we have students doing a lot of pitching of their ideas and presenting through PowerPoint and other ways their ideas, putting rough financials together and all that, but really just getting your idea out there, learning what the steps are you have to go through, and setting you loose on that. We then require that everyone have an economic principles class, either within entrepreneurial studies or within the econ department. We want students then to take a quantitative tools course, and I'm teaching that right now. And that's an Excel-based course where we really focus on making sure you have the Excel skills you need to be able to understand financial statements, to put together financial statements, to analyze whether a company is doing well or not. And right now we're spending a lot of time, a lot of my assignments right now are focused on analyzing Tesla stock values over the past year. And so it's a lot of Excel. But again, I think to be successful, you have to really know Excel, and you have to be able to use it as a tool in whatever you do. So that's 3 courses. The 4th one would be a required ethics course. And we have a bunch of ethics courses, either in entrepreneurial studies or in the philosophy department. We then have students take two electives, and they can come from a wide variety of courses. So there's the 6 courses. And then the 7th one, which Tanner is in right now, is called the Senior Capstone course. And basically the idea is we want students to be able to either individually or in groups take their idea and try to launch it into something to launch it. So going through the steps in much more detail than in that first year, but really then getting lots of input from outside people and really pushing the idea and getting it as far as possible before one graduates. Ideally, you actually do this. I called it the Senior Capstone. We're actually now pushing that juniors do it so that they have time in the next year after their junior year to keep pushing their idea, because I think we'll get a lot more successful businesses and nonprofits to launch if we do it earlier.
Yeah, and I can kind of speak a little bit towards what the Capstone experience has been. It really shows you what aspects of going through a startup would look like, and there's always pieces that until you do it, you don't necessarily know you need to do in the first place. And we have just went through this with an alum who was trying to work on a local business idea, and seeing the little pieces that are important that you may not necessarily even recognize need to be there, and continuing to go through the process is, at least in my opinion, the only way in which you actually learn what those pieces are and how they need to operate within one another. So it's definitely an experience that teaches you things that you wouldn't necessarily get with just kind of studying in a book. So,
right. Yeah.
But going on to the next question here, this is a question that I had for a while as a student, and I'm still curious to see where it will go, but it's whether or not will the Entrepreneurial Studies program ever grow to become a major at HWS?
That is an interesting question. It is such a popular minor, and again, let me emphasize that it's 5 years old, so we're still growing. My goal is to make sure that we get it right as a minor. It's true that a lot of our trustees and others would like it to become a major. I think what you need right now is a minor. I think having the basic skills you need, we can deliver that in a minor, and you can couple that with any major across campus and be a really strong combination.
Yeah, I would say to kind of along the same lines as a student who is a minor in that department and then a major in economics, it definitely teaches you pieces that you would need, and hearing from people who are in other departments such as biology, music, or dance, anything like that. It just kind of allows you to take whatever your major focus is and learn how to take those, I guess, problem solving skills and entrepreneurial mindset towards whatever else you're working with and on. So it's definitely, even though it's a minor, it's still skills and very valuable information to be given. And then I get kind of another question here would be, what students involved in the entrepreneurial studies programs tend to do after graduation? So what do students go on to do after they graduate?
Oh, interesting question. So such a wide range. So first of all, students in the minor come from many different majors. So we have econ, media and society, philosophy, English, history, the sciences. So again, it's a really broad group of students in the minor. And so they're obviously going all over the place. We have a few students who are actually trying to launching or have launched their own businesses. For the most part, what we're finding so far is that students are pursuing normal careers to start. And, you think about it, it's a sure paycheck that way, right? It's knowing that you're not going to have to struggle initially. But my hope, and I'm already seeing this to some extent, we know that what will happen is you might go off and work for a company for a couple of years, and then you might be thinking, you know what, I really want to go back and jump in and launch that idea that I was working on. And maybe at that point, they'll have more financial security to do it. I think that's probably a typical route, and one that makes sense for many people. I would like to see, I was going to say, we also every year we have what's called the pitch contest. And the pitch contest is one of our biggest nights on campus. And luckily it happened before we shut down this year. It's our largest gathering space on campus. It was standing room only this year. Basically, we narrow it down. We have 4 finalists who present that night, present their company or their idea, and the winner walks away with a check for $10,000 to launch with, or to start launching. And so from that, we actually have had several success stories now. People who are pursuing those ideas as now that they've graduated from HWS, and I know we're going to see a lot more of those.
I will say that is one of my favorite nights of the year, is to go to that event. But I kind of a last question here before we open it up to any audience questions. Wondering, Professor, if you'll make an elevator pitch for the value of liberal arts educations in today's society.
Absolutely. We hear all the time from companies that they don't necessarily want students who major in business. What they want is well-rounded students who have learned how to think critically about problems and know how to analyze the problems. And they find that the liberal arts provides that education that they think students need. They can teach you how to do the specific skills. They need you to be able to think outside the box. And that's what we try to teach here at Hobart and William Smith.
Yeah, I will say, as a student who has now gone through the liberal arts education for 4 years, there are plenty of things that I have learned in classes I've taken, including a dance class my sophomore year, that I would have never thought would have been something I enjoyed or ever would have done in the first place, but has shown me different skills and learning abilities that I don't think I ever would have got at just a strict business school. So I'm glad I'm here in liberal arts education. So at this point in time, feel free to start. If you got any questions, throw them into the chat there, and I'll start filtering through them and start rattling off a few questions here. So first one we have is regarding bachelor's or an MBA, the 5-year program. I was wondering if there are any additional requirements or prerequisites for that program itself.
Yeah, thanks, Max, for that question. So within the econ department, since I am in the econ department, that's one I feel really confident talking about. We have partnerships with 5 or 6 different MBA programs where you can go directly from being an undergrad at HWS to earning your MBA there in one additional year, so 5 years total. We've had several students, for example, go through the Simon School program at the University of Rochester, and the Simon School actually wants to get students who are from the local area, for example, to stay in the area and go to grad school in business. So they've actually incentivized that quite a bit as well. But that's just one. We have several, and I'd be happy to answer additional questions for you, Max, about exactly how that works.
All right. And the second question we got here is, how exactly would the architecture program here at HWS couple up with the entrepreneurial studies minor?
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent question. We have a really strong architectural studies major, and we do have several students already who are in the minor for entrepreneurial studies. And I think it's a really great pairing, because one of the things you learn in architectural studies, you do a lot of studio work, and you're thinking about how can you create these prototypes, and that's something that translates really well into entrepreneurial studies, because part of what we try to push is, if you have an idea, we want you to create a mock-up of it. And we want you, whether it's a drawing, whether it's an app on a phone, or whether you're making something physical that you can demonstrate. And in many ways, a lot of the skills you learn in architectural studies are directly transferable to that. So absolutely.
And then, kind of along the same lines there, are there any majors or minors that you feel, I guess, couple well with the entrepreneurial studies minor?
Yeah, so many. Obviously, 30% of our minors actually are econ majors. We'd like to really see it broaden out more. For example, if you're interested in dance or music or arts, I think that's also a really strong pairing, and we're working to make some tracks within the minor directly applicable to those majors. The sciences, absolutely. For some reason, we don't have that many people yet from the sciences who are minoring in entrepreneurial studies, but we're going to work on that because, again, if you have an idea, if you think about, if an idea comes up as a science student, then what we hope is that we would be able to give you the confidence and the skills you need to be able to actually tackle that problem.
We got another question here regarding the 5-year MBA program and whether or not it's still something that is highly sought after in this day and age.
So, Liam, that's an interesting question, and I am going to be honest. I do not think it's highly sought after in this day and age. It's we definitely see students coming in who definitely think they want to get an MBA, and a bunch do. Usually the track that happens though is people decide, I'm going to, when I graduate, I'm going to work for a few years, and then often, 2 or 3 years out, I often get emails from alums that say, Professor Drennan, I think I need to go back to grad school, and a bunch of them go get an MBA, but others go after PhDs at that point. And I would really urge people to explore a little bit before you jump back into school. I told you my story, and I did not go directly from MIT and being a nuclear engineer to grad school. I never would have ended up a professor in economics if I had. Instead, I went out and worked, and I got some experience, and I thought, this is not what I want to be doing. And it became clear to me what I did want to do. So again, I think sometimes it's fine to take time doing it, to find that passion and how you're actually going to go for it.
Yeah, and again, from a student perspective, I initially coming into school, that was my plan. And the 5-year MBA program was something I thought coming in my first year, that was what I was going to go and do. And kind of learning different things, you find out as you come, especially with a liberal arts education, you learn other pieces that you've never been exposed to before, and you start to figure out other passions that you didn't have before. And that's something also I was lucky enough to have a professional work experience this summer. And while I enjoyed every minute of it and I was really glad to do it, it showed me a lot of pieces of the workplace that I didn't necessarily think I wanted to be in anymore. So I think, getting it within the 5-year program and saving yourself a year is definitely tempting, especially as a student like myself who's about to leave college. Staying in college sounds great, but it's definitely something that you'd rather go do it and know exactly what you're going for and know exactly what you want to be, I guess, studying, instead of coming out and then realizing you spent extra time and it's not actually something you wanted to spend time studying. So from a student perspective there who was in that same exact boat coming into college.
That's really interesting, Tanner. I'd forgotten that you came in wanting to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's changed pretty drastically at this point.
Yeah, what I've had more students do the last few years than the MBA. We've had students actually do the 3+2 program with Dartmouth. Yeah. So then you end up with an engineering degree and a degree from HWS, and it's a really, really strong program. And I'm thinking of my most recent grad who did that now is at JP Morgan, making more money than I make. Absolutely.
That's definitely a really cool program. I'm pretty sure Dartmouth lets you do it you do 2 years here, 1 year there, and you come back again. So you don't necessarily lose out on your last semester on campus, which is
correct. You're back for your senior year. Yes. Yeah.
Check and see if we got any other questions here. Got one more for you. I guess one question regarding the Entrepreneurial Studies department itself is, if you don't want to start a business or produce or innovate a product, is the entrepreneurial studies program still something that you can benefit from?
Yes, thank you so much for asking that question. Part of the reason that I started the minor, and it was a team of us that did, but I was the champion behind it. And part of my passion, I'm really passionate about environmental problems and energy issues and solving some of those complex societal problems we have, like climate change. And I honestly believe that in order to solve those problems, we need more students focusing on entrepreneurship, because a lot of those solutions are not going to come from the government. They're going to come from entrepreneurs who come up with solutions that no one else has thought of. So there's that route. And we have so many other problems that, from homelessness to food deserts, on and on and on. And again, I just feel that this minor helps students, once they see a problem, to have the skills and confidence they need to be able to tackle that problem in a meaningful way. So yes, start a nonprofit, solve a social problem. That's, something I would really love to see more students tackle.
I think that was the main thing that drew me to the program itself. I'm not the biggest idea person, but the idea to be able to take the learning structure and the way in which to problem solve is extremely valuable when it comes to any issue or anything you're really trying to figure out in the first place. So that's definitely something that the minor itself provides you.
So Tanner, let me ask you a question. I know you studied abroad, and that influenced what you wanted to do for your capstone project very significantly.
Yes.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about that experience and how you came up with your idea and all that then.
Yeah, for sure. So for me, I ended up going abroad to one of our more academically heavy programs in Maastricht, Netherlands, right on the southern border of the country. And I took a course there that was called Social Sustainable and Social Entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And it was a 300 level course that was completely facilitation. So we got 2 weeks, 2 sessions of lectures, and then we had to basically go into a case study for ourselves and then facilitate a class session for our internal class. So for me, we were looking at companies that were not just successful businesses, but also had social or environmental missions behind them. The one I ended up working on was known as Acumen. It's an investment fund that only invests in companies that have social missions and tries to do it on a smaller scale, but they still try to make profitable investments. So going through companies like that, and one of the other case studies was Patagonia or Ben & Jerry's. We looked at all those different companies that kind of have the triple bottom line structure, where they don't just take into account their profits, but they take into account the social mission and impact that their company actually has. And the final piece of that course was to come up with an idea and a project that would, I guess, a company that would have that social mission behind it. And that was something that my project personally was one that was a lot more close to the community there. So it was a little harder for me to get connected to, but there was a project that got presented that brought up the idea of a craft brewing company that had a social mission behind it. And their main focus was addressing a market where craft brewing is kind of a big segment, is the middle class, middle-aged male. And typically that is also a segment through research that doesn't talk and does not necessarily have any real serious conversations regarding their mental health, and tries to just push it down as things that they don't necessarily need to address and or talk about. And so their idea was to have the partnership with a local, this team was a group of students from Australia. So they had partnered with an Australian brewing company, and they had talked to them, and they had managed to actually get them to agree to it. And they were going to end up just having a really coolly designed beer can for them for advertising and branding, but on those cans themselves would have questions. So if you were sitting down, their whole purpose was, if you're drinking a craft beer, you're typically sitting down and just having a drink and having a conversation. And on those cans or bottles, they actually ended up putting questions regarding mental health and different topics that necessarily wouldn't be talked about in those circles. It was their assumption that those groups of people within the demographic who drinks that type of beer don't necessarily have those conversations. And that was something that was really interesting to me because it was a way in which, instead of trying to change the way a group of people think, it's finding a way into that group to, I guess, spread a social message or mission to bring awareness to an issue that sometimes people try to avoid. Personally, it was a little bit of a question mark for me because the idea of mental health and alcohol I didn't like the combination too much. But I think that the idea of getting and reaching out to a demographic through something that they already have an interest in, such as craft beer, is actually something now I am working on for our Capstone project. So me and my partner Amari are in the process of trying to figure out what the best steps would be, whether that's partnering with other organizations that already exist or setting up our own social mission within the company itself, and then reaching out to different local craft breweries as well as larger craft breweries to see if this is something that they would be willing to do, and or I guess what their pains are when it comes to their purchasing of bottles, purchasing of cans, getting distribution channels, and seeing where we can help them and kind of solve their problems while also addressing a larger social issue at hand through just getting it onto the product that we'd be delivering. So that's my current capstone project that I'm working on. So it's been definitely something that going abroad and taking that class showed me that you can't, not necessarily you can't, but being an entrepreneur doesn't just depend on making a profit, making a successful business, but it can be used to solve larger issues that are at hand within, I guess, your community or just society as a whole. And it's definitely something that whenever I now work on a project like this or think about it, I try to add that piece in wherever I can, because typically it's something that it makes it more meaningful for me, and therefore my work behind it is therefore more important. So
Thanks, Tanner.
Yeah, we got a few more questions here. First one is, does the 3-2 program fit together well with the entrepreneurial studies minor? More specifically from like a course load perspective.
That would take planning. That would absolutely take planning. I think it would be a really strong combination. You would definitely need to be in the entrepreneurial studies courses in year one. But there's no reason that couldn't work. We just hasn't been something that's come up yet. But it would just take planning. So yes.
Yeah, and I think too with that, that's a big thing with not just only the entrepreneurial studies department, but any major or minor on campus, is there are a lot of options to take, and some people tend to get stuck in one track and don't kind of work with their advisors. And I know for a fact that when you talk within your advisors, there's a lot of things that can work and different paths you can take to take the courses that you are genuinely interested in taking. I know for a fact that Professor Drennan has been extremely helpful for me going through that, because even though I knew coming in that I was going to be an economics major, it was still a lot of courses that I wanted to take that were outside the department and wouldn't count towards major minor. So just making sure you to sit down and talk with your advisor and go over things, and making sure that you're kind of still on track for everything you need is definitely, no matter what you're taking, you'll find a way to be able to fit things together depending on what your interests are.
Right.
See, I got one more question for you here, Professor. Just wondering if you could speak to any of the success stories of students who have come out of the entrepreneurial studies department.
Yeah, there are quite a few now. I think I'll just talk about Max from last year. Max spent the last 2 years of his time here at HWS. He had a really good idea, and it was from a personal tragedy that he got this idea. But basically what he really wanted to do was he wanted to create some type of life-saving system that could be deployed either on buoys in the ocean or in pools that would be able to differentiate whether somebody was drowning or not. And so, it gets pretty complicated, but the part that I really like is we were able to fund him. We have good funding from alums, by the way, to help students launch projects. So, he came to us with a budget, like $6,000 he needed to do a prototype. And the prototype, basically what he did was, in the pool here at the colleges, he had a buoy with the system on it. He bought all the parts for it, etc. And then basically what he was doing is he was having people either swim or pretend they were drowning so that the system, and he recorded all this. And the idea was then to use artificial intelligence techniques to figure out whether the person was okay or struggling, and therefore send a warning message back. And there's a lot more to it, but it's a really ambitious and awesome story. Max graduated a year ago. He's actually out in California working on this idea, and I think, as with many ideas, I think it'll probably end up pivoting into something else. But the skills he's learned and the tools he's created so far, I think they're going to eventually it will turn into something really powerful. So I think that's a really good example.
All right. It looks like we don't have any more questions. We'll give a second here for anyone has any last minute questions to throw into the chat here. Feel free to ask questions as well about just anything regarding basic student life, as I'm still a student here for a little bit longer. I can try to answer anything I can with regards to workload and anything like that within the Entrepreneurial Studies department. I'm also one of the student workers down at our Bozzuto Center here at the on campus. It's our Entrepreneurial Studies, headquarters, as I would put it. It's an open study space for the majority of the time, but then there's now a second floor classroom, which is where my capstone was being taught until everything kind of started closing down on us. So any questions about facilities or anything like that regarding the Entrepreneurial Studies department, or just general questions, more than happy to answer. And also, if you don't have them now, I'll throw my email address in there, and I'll try to get some things. Yeah, we'll both leave our email addresses in here. So if anyone has any questions, you can feel free to shoot any questions our way.
Right. And I mean it. That's my email address. I'm happy to answer emails. I'm happy to jump on a Zoom with any of you. Doing that all day long with other students, might as well add some more conversations. It's working well. So anything we can do to help you answer your questions and figure out how this would all work for you, we're happy to do that. So I think that's probably a good place to end it for today. We thank you so much for your participation. It's a different world. I'd rather see you all face to face, but this will do for what we can do. And thank you, Tanner, for doing this.
Anytime. I've got more time on my hands now. So.
Okay. Bye, all.
Excellent. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.